Racist cop arrests black woman for nothing. Then her SEAL status drops. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Lena Williams was no stranger to tough situations. A former Navy SEAL, she had earned a reputation for being tough, sharp, and highly disciplined. Born and raised in a quiet neighborhood, Lena had always known that her path in life would require more effort than most. But she was driven. She had dreams, goals, and the resilience to achieve them. She had served with distinction in the SEALs, facing challenges that many could only imagine. Now, as a civilian, she had tried to live a peaceful life, focusing on her career and personal goals. But sometimes, life has a way of testing you when you least expect it. One chilly evening, after a long day of work, Lena was walking back to her apartment. She had just finished a shift at the local nonprofit where she volunteered, helping at-risk youth in the community. She wasn't doing anything unusual, just walking home, minding her own business. But as she turned the corner to her street, she saw flashing lights. A patrol car was parked nearby, and a police officer stood outside, eyeing her suspiciously. Lena was no stranger to being looked at differently because of her skin color, but this felt different. Officer John Miller, who was standing by the patrol car, motioned for her to stop. Lena felt her heart rate spike slightly, though she kept her composure. "Excuse me, ma'am," Officer Miller said, his voice cold and dismissive. "Do you have any identification?" Lena was caught off guard. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She wasn't breaking any laws. But she kept her calm. "I'm just walking home, officer. I don't know what this is about." Officer Miller didn't respond with an explanation. Instead, he repeated his demand for her ID, his tone growing sharper. Lena could feel the tension rising. Something about the officer's demeanor felt off. "Why are you stopping me?" she asked, now more assertive but still polite. The officer didn't answer directly. He just stared at her, almost as if sizing her up. For a moment, Lena considered just walking away, but she didn't. She knew that doing so could lead to unnecessary escalation. She stayed still, waiting for clarity. She had never had any problems with the police before, but something about this situation didn't sit right. It wasn't just the officer's attitude. It was something deeper, something familiar. She knew what it felt like to be judged before even speaking. Officer Miller continued to stand there, his eyes scanning her up and down. "What's your business here?" he asked again, his voice harsh. Lena's thoughts raced. She knew her rights, and she knew she wasn't doing anything wrong. Yet, in that moment, she couldn't help but feel that she was being singled out. She took a deep breath, her military training kicking in. She didn't let the officer's words throw her off balance. But the tension in the air was undeniable. As Lena stood still on the sidewalk, facing Officer Miller, she felt the weight of the moment settle in. The flash of police lights flickered behind her, and the cold evening air wrapped around her like a tightening grip. She had faced worse situations before, much worse, in fact. But this felt different. This wasn't a military operation where she knew the rules and had the training to handle it. This was personal. This was something deeper. Officer Miller continued to eye her, his gaze sharp and suspicious, like he was waiting for her to slip up. "Do you have any idea how late it is?" he asked, his voice laced with a hint of condescension. Lena didn't flinch. She wasn't going to let him provoke her. "I know what time it is," she responded evenly, still trying to keep her cool. "I'm just walking home from work." The officer didn't respond to her explanation. Instead, he took a step closer, his stance growing more authoritative. Lena remained calm, but inside, she couldn't help but feel the rising tension. Something about the way he was acting felt familiar, like an all-too-common scenario she had heard of before. The scenario where a black woman was unfairly targeted, where assumptions were made simply based on the color of her skin. Lena's mind began to race. But she kept her body still, her military training kicking in. She knew better than to show any weakness. "What's your name?" Officer Miller asked, his voice growing colder. Lena Williams, she replied without hesitation. I'm sure you can run my information if you need to. She was trying to stay as polite as possible, but she couldn't help but feel the unease gnawing at her. The officer didn't make a move to check her ID or to respond in any meaningful way. Instead, he asked again, "What are you doing out here this late?" His question seemed more like an accusation than an inquiry. Lena took a deep breath. "I'm walking home," she said, her voice steady but firm. That's it. For a brief moment, Officer Miller hesitated. Lena couldn't tell if he was confused by her calm demeanor or if he was considering his next move. Either way, the silence stretched between them, growing thicker with each passing second. She felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This wasn't just about her walking home. This was about something much bigger, something she had seen before, something she had heard too many stories about. She was being stopped because of who she was, because of the color of her skin. It wasn't the first time Lena had been made to feel like an outsider, but tonight it felt like she was being forced into a corner she couldn't escape from. She could feel the injustice rising inside her, but she knew she couldn't let it show. The officer's eyes narrowed. "You're not going anywhere until we sort this out," he said, his tone firm. Lena didn't say anything. She wasn't sure what to do. She could feel her heart racing, but she kept herself composed. She had no reason to believe she was doing anything wrong, and yet here she was, caught in a moment that felt all too familiar. She had heard stories from other black women, seen the headlines, read the accounts of police interactions that spiraled out of control. She wasn't about to let herself be another statistic. She wasn't going to let Officer Miller's assumptions define her. As the officer reached for his radio, Lena's mind started to churn. She knew the system, the way it worked, or rather, the way it often didn't work for people like her. But she wasn't going to let that stop her. She had spent years fighting for respect, for recognition, and she wasn't going to let this moment undo everything she had worked for. No, Lena Williams was not going to back down. Not now, not ever. I can feel my heart racing as Officer Miller continues to stare at me, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. For a moment, I wonder if he's going to escalate things, take me in for something I haven't even done. But I can't let fear control me. Not now. Not after everything I've been through. I stand my ground, my back straight, my shoulders square. I'm just walking home, I say again, trying to keep my voice steady. That's all. The officer doesn't respond immediately. His hand hovers near his radio, and for a moment, I think he might call for backup. I brace myself. The thought crosses my mind. What if the situation gets out of hand? What if he decides I'm a threat simply because of who I am? It's a thought I've had before, but tonight it feels more real than ever. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm not breaking any laws. I'm just a woman trying to get home after a long day. But the color of my skin makes me a target. I've seen it happen too many times, heard the stories, read the headlines. And now here I am, living it. The silence between us stretches, growing more uncomfortable by the second. I feel his gaze on me, like he's trying to figure me out, trying to make me break. But I won't. I've faced much worse. I've survived SEAL training. I've been through things that would have crushed most people, but I'm still standing. And I'm not about to let this officer's biases get the best of me. "Do you have any ID?" he asked again, his voice colder now. I nod, pulling my ID from my pocket and handing it over. "Here, you can check it." Officer Miller takes the ID from me, but his expression doesn't soften. He studies it for a moment before looking back at me, his eyes still skeptical. "You're a SEAL?" he asks, his voice laced with disbelief. "Yes," I answer simply, trying not to let the irritation seep into my tone. "I serve in the Navy." "What's your point?" He doesn't respond right away. Instead, he looks at the ID. Again, almost as if he's trying to figure out how someone like me could have served in a place like the SEALs. But I've been through too much to care about his judgments. He could think whatever he wanted, but I knew the truth. I knew who I was. I knew what I had accomplished. And none of that had anything to do with the color of my skin. The officer finally pockets my ID, still watching me like I'm some kind of criminal. He takes a step back, but his stance doesn't loosen. "I'm going to need you to stay right here while I run this," he says, his tone still clipped. I don't say anything, but I feel a surge of frustration rise up inside me. It's not the first time I've been treated this way, and I know it won't be the last. But tonight feels different. Tonight, I'm not backing down. Tonight, I'm going to stand up for myself. As the officer turns to his car to run my information, I can't help but think about how many times this has happened to people like me. The countless stories I've heard of black men and women being unfairly targeted by the police, being treated as criminals simply because of their race. It's exhausting. It's infuriating. But it's also something I refuse to accept. I'm Lena Williams. I'm a veteran. I'm someone who fought for this country, for freedom, and for justice. And I won't let anyone, especially not someone like Officer Miller, take that away from me. I stand there, waiting, the minutes dragging on like hours. Officer Miller is still in his car, running my information, and the cold wind picks up again, sending a chill through my body. I try to shake off the discomfort, but I can't ignore the feeling in the pit of my stomach. The longer this drags on, the more frustrated I get. I'm trying to stay calm, try to remind myself that I've been through worse, that I've faced harder situations. But this is different. It's not just about the stop. It's about the way I'm being treated, the way my presence here is being questioned. The fact that the officer can't seem to understand why I'm walking home, or why someone like me could be out here at this hour, makes me feel like an outsider in my own neighborhood. I've never been one to back down, and I'm not going to start now. But something about this whole situation makes me wonder if things will ever truly change. I've heard the stories, seen the news reports. I've seen how black people are treated differently, and I've felt the sting of that reality many times before. But tonight, it feels like I'm right at the center of it all. Lena Williams, a former Navy SEAL, reduced to someone suspicious, someone whose presence needs to be questioned. I don't have time for this. As I stand there, I try to take a deep breath to calm my nerves. I focus on the task ahead, not letting my emotions get the best of me. The officer's words replay in my mind. Stay right here while I run this. I force myself to stay still, but it's not easy. After what feels like an eternity, Officer Miller finally steps out of his car. His face is unreadable, and I can't tell if the tension in his eyes is from frustration or something else. He walks toward me slowly, his hands in his pockets. Everything checks out, he says, his voice clipped. You're free to go. For a moment, I just stand there trying to process what just happened. The relief is there, but it's mixed with something else, something I can't quite put into words. I nod, not saying anything, and begin to walk away. But as I take a few steps, I hear the officer speak again. You might want to be careful, though, he calls out. I stop in my tracks, turning to face him. My heart skips a beat as I wait for whatever he's about to say. People like you, he continues, his voice dripping with judgment, shouldn't be out here alone at night. You never know what could happen. The words hit me like a slap in the face. People like me? What does he mean by that? I stand there, frozen, trying to make sense of what just happened. I can feel my anger rising, but I don't let it show. Instead, I turn and keep walking, my pace steady but my mind racing. I think about what just occurred, the way I was treated, the assumptions that were made about me. It's clear now that it wasn't just about a simple stop. It was about something deeper, something that has been ingrained in this society for far too long. I think about the countless others who have experienced the same thing, the ones who haven't been so lucky to walk away. I think about the injustices, the systemic racism that still exists in this country. And I wonder, is this ever going to change? Am I going to have to fight this fight for the rest of my life? But I know one thing for sure. I'm not going to let anyone silence me. Not now, not ever. This moment, this interaction, it's just one small part of the bigger picture. And I'm determined to keep moving forward, to keep fighting for what's right, no matter the obstacles in my way. I don't look back as I walk away from Officer Miller, though I can feel the weight of his gaze still following me. My mind is a whirlwind of thoughts, but there's one question that keeps coming back to me. How many times will this happen before people start listening? It's not just about the police anymore. It's about the system, about the way people like me are treated every day, everywhere. I've spent years fighting for equality, for the recognition of my worth. But tonight was a reminder of just how much farther we have to go. I reach my apartment and close the door behind me. But the image of Officer Miller's judgmental stare doesn't fade. I know I should be relieved, but there's a knot in my stomach that won't go away. I've dealt with this my entire life, being seen as less than, being judged before I even speak, just because of the color of my skin. But tonight felt different. Tonight, it was personal. And it's not just because of what happened with Officer Miller. It's because I've seen this story play out too many times. I've heard the stories from other black women, from my friends and family, from strangers who have shared their experiences. And I know that even though I walked away tonight, there are so many who don't. So many who end up in situations that go from bad to worse, simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time, or because they were targeted because of their race. I walk into the kitchen and grab a glass of water, try to steady myself. I don't want to let this situation consume me, but it's hard to ignore the feeling of being trapped in a system that doesn't care about people like me. I can't just forget what happened. I can't pretend that it's not part of a larger pattern that I've been fighting against my whole life. But I also know that I can't let it break me. I've faced too much to give up now. I've spent years pushing through obstacles, battling stereotypes, and proving my worth in ways that many people will never understand. And yet, here I am, still having to prove that I belong in the same spaces as anyone else. It's exhausting. It's infuriating. But it's also the reality for so many people in this country. As I sit down at my kitchen table, I pull out my phone and start scrolling through social media. I see post after post about similar incidents, stories of black men and women being harassed, stopped, or worse, just for existing. The posts are filled with outrage, with people demanding justice, with people calling for change. And I can't help but feel that same frustration bubbling up inside me. I know that this fight is far from over, but I also know that I'm not alone. There are millions of people out there who are tired of being treated like criminals, tired of being judged based on things they can't control. And we're all fighting for the same thing, equality. It's not enough to just walk away from an encounter like the one I had with Officer Miller. It's not enough to just hope that things will get better. We have to keep fighting. We have to keep pushing for change. I close my phone and take a deep breath. Tomorrow is another day, and I know I have work to do. But tonight, I take a moment for myself. I remind myself that I am strong. I am resilient. I am Lena Williams. And I'm not backing down. I wake up the next morning, the events from yesterday still fresh in my mind. As much as I try to push them aside, I can't. The encounter with Officer Miller, the way he looked at me, the words he said, they've left a mark. But I won't let it control me. I have work to do, and I can't afford to waste time dwelling on the negativity. I pull myself out of bed and get dressed, moving through my morning routine like I've done 1,000 times before. I remind myself that I am more than what happened last night. I am Lena Williams, a woman who has faced adversity head-on and come out stronger. As I make my coffee, I think about the bigger picture. I think about how many other people just like me, have been caught in the same trap. How many other black men and women have been stopped, harassed, or worse, for no reason other than the color of their skin. The thought weighs heavily on me, but I know that I can't let it break me. I can't let it make me feel powerless. I've spent too many years fighting for respect, for justice, for my place in this world. I've earned my spot, and I'm not going to let anyone take it away from me. After I finish my coffee, I grab my things and head out the door. I don't know what today will bring, but I'm ready for whatever comes my way. I know that the fight for equality isn't easy. I know that there are days when it feels like nothing is changing, like nothing is getting better. But I also know that I'm not alone. There are millions of people out there fighting the same fight. People who refuse to back down. People who won't accept the status quo. And together, we are making a difference. I drive to work, my mind racing with thoughts of what happened last night. I keep thinking about Officer Miller and his words. People like you shouldn't be out here alone at night. What did he mean by that? Why did he feel the need to say it? I know I'll never get an answer, but the question lingers in my mind. It's clear that there's a level of prejudice, of bias, that still exists in this world. It's a bias that can be hard to see, hard to prove, but it's there. And it's something that people like me have to deal with every day. I pull into the parking lot of the nonprofit where I work, and I take a deep breath. I'm here to do good. I'm here to make a difference. And no matter what happened last night, that's what matters. I walk into the building and start my day, doing the work I love, helping young people who are trying to make a better life for themselves. I focus on them, on their struggles, on their hopes for the future. I try not to let the outside world affect what I do here. But I can't ignore the feeling that I'm fighting two battles at once. The one I'm fighting for myself, and the one I'm fighting for the future, for a better world where things like what happened last night don't happen anymore. As I sit down at my desk, I think about what comes next. I know that the journey ahead won't be easy. But I'm ready. I have to be, because the world may try to knock me down, but I will always get back up. I didn't realize how much the incident with Officer Miller had affected me until the next few days passed in a blur of work and routine. Each day, I told myself I was moving forward, that I was letting go of the anger and frustration, but deep down, it was still there. It was a gnawing feeling that wouldn't go away. I found myself questioning everything more than I ever had before. Was I just another black woman in a world that saw me as a threat? Was I really safe? Or was I always one step away from another encounter like that? These thoughts haunted me as I went about my day, trying to focus on my work, but still feeling the weight of what happened, the weight of systemic injustice. The nonprofit I worked for had been busy, as usual. We had a big event coming up to support at-risk youth, and there was a lot to do. I was grateful for the distraction, but even then, the incident kept creeping back into my mind. I couldn't shake the image of Officer Miller's cold stare, the way he had looked at me like I didn't belong, like I didn't have the right to be there. That night, after a long day, I sat at my kitchen table, just staring at the wall. The silence around me felt thick. It was hard to explain, but it felt like a weight pressing down on me, suffocating me in ways I hadn't expected. The battle inside me was real, and I didn't know how to win. I was tired of fighting for respect. Tired of always having to prove that I belonged. And yet, I knew I couldn't give up. I couldn't let the system win. I couldn't let the people who judge me based on my skin color control my life. The thought of staying silent, of letting this moment pass without speaking up, was not an option. I had to do something. I had to make my voice heard. I thought about all the stories I had heard, the stories of other black people who had faced similar discrimination, the ones who hadn't been so lucky, the ones who were caught in situations that escalated into something much worse. I thought about how many of us had been silenced for too long, how many of us had been ignored. I wasn't going to let that happen to me. I wasn't going to let this moment define me. I took a deep breath and grabbed my phone, opening up the social media apps I had been avoiding for the past few days. I needed to see what was being said. I needed to hear from others who had been through the same thing. I found post after post, videos of incidents similar to mine, stories from people who had been targeted simply because of the color of their skin. The posts were filled with outrage, but also with hope, with calls for change, with a reminder that we were not alone in this fight. And that's when I knew what I had to do. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't pretend that everything was okay. It was time to take action. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. I knew what I had to do. I was going to share my story. I was going to make sure people heard me. I was going to stand up for myself, for the countless others who had faced the same kind of injustice, for the future of this country. It wouldn't be easy. It would be uncomfortable. But I couldn't let fear stop me. Not anymore. I knew the moment I decided to speak out, I couldn't turn back. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about everyone who had been through what I had, about the countless people who were still suffering. In silence, I wasn't going to be one of those people. I wasn't going to hide in the shadows of fear. I grabbed my phone, opened the camera app, and started recording. My hand was shaking slightly, but I steadied myself. I looked directly into the lens. My name is Lena Williams. I began, my voice steady but firm. I'm a former Navy SEAL, and I'm here to tell you that no one should have to face injustice like this. The words came out faster than I expected, but they were honest. They were raw, and they were exactly what I needed to say. The other night, I was stopped by a police officer while walking home from work. I did nothing wrong. I wasn't breaking any laws. I was just trying to get home. But because of the color of my skin, I was treated like a criminal. I was judged before I even had the chance to speak. I paused for a moment, taking a breath. My mind was racing, but I couldn't stop now. I had to keep going. This isn't just my story. This is the story of so many people, people who are unfairly targeted, people who are treated like they don't belong, simply because of who they are. We can't keep letting this happen. We can't keep letting fear and prejudice guide the way people are treated. I finished the video and sat there for a moment, staring at the screen. I wasn't sure if I was ready to share this with the world, but I knew it had to be done. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I posted the video. It was out there now, for everyone to see, for everyone to hear. I sat back in my chair, my heart racing. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew I had taken the first step. I had spoken out, and I wasn't alone. The next few hours were a blur. My phone buzzed nonstop with messages, comments, and notifications. The video had gone viral. People were sharing it, tagging others, and expressing their support. I was overwhelmed by the response, but I wasn't surprised. This was a conversation that needed to happen. This was a conversation that had been avoided for far too long. As the evening wore on, I received messages from people all over the country, Black. Men and women who had experienced the same thing, who had been through the same kind of injustice. I wasn't just speaking for myself. I was speaking for all of us. And I realized something in that moment. I wasn't fighting alone. There was power in our voices, power in our stories. The more we spoke out, the stronger we became. And maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something bigger. Maybe this was the moment things would start to change. The fight wasn't over, but I was ready for it. I had to be, because the truth was, no one else was going to fight for us if we didn't fight for ourselves. I woke up the next morning to the sound of my phone buzzing relentlessly. The video I posted had spread faster than I ever expected. Notifications kept popping up, and I felt a rush of emotions I couldn't quite put into words. There were thousands of comments, thousands of people sharing their own experiences, offering their support, and standing in solidarity. It felt like the world was listening, but there was also a sense of weight. I realized that what I had started wasn't going to stop with a single post. The moment I hit that upload button, I had stepped into a much larger fight. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the people who had been silenced, about the people whose voices had never been heard. It was about change, real change, and it was going to take all of us to make it happen. I couldn't afford to let the overwhelming response distract me, though. I had work to do. I knew that this was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. As much as I appreciated the messages, the likes, and the shares, I needed to focus on what came next. The fight wasn't over, and I wasn't about to let this momentum fade. I spent the next few days reading through the messages, responding to people who shared their stories with me, and offering support in return. It felt good to connect, but it also reminded me of just how many people were still hurting, still dealing with the same struggles I had faced. It was eye-opening and humbling. I knew I couldn't stop now. The pressure was on. I didn't want to be just another viral story. I wanted to be part of something that would last, something that would create real, lasting change. But where did I start? What was the next step in this journey? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't let this moment pass. I needed to take action to turn this momentum into something tangible. I started reaching out to organizations, speaking with activists, and collaborating with others who have been working on these issues for years. The more I spoke with people who had been in the fight for longer than I had, the more I realized how much I still had to learn. This wasn't a battle I could fight alone, and it wasn't something that would be solved overnight. But the connections I was making, the conversations I was having, they felt like the beginning of something bigger, something that could make a real difference. Slowly but surely, I started seeing the impact of my story. I wasn't just a former SEAL anymore, or a random person on the internet telling her story. I was part of a movement, and it was growing. There were rallies, marches, and protests, all demanding justice, equality, and an end to the systemic racism that had plagued this country for so long. I was invited to speak at one of these events, and I knew that I couldn't back down. I had to stand there in front of a crowd and continue what I had started. I couldn't be silent anymore. The world was watching, and it was time to show up. That day, as I stood on stage, looking out at the sea of faces, I realized something. This fight wasn't just for me. It wasn't just for the people who had shared their stories online. It was for everyone who had ever been told they didn't matter, for everyone who had ever been treated like they didn't belong. And I knew, without a doubt, that I couldn't stop now. This was just the beginning.